by the Butte County officer involved shooting protocol team. The shooting scene has been processed. The involved witness officers have been interviewed, as well as the officers involved in the shooting. The DA is reviewing dash cam video that was taken during the incident. The preliminary findings are consistent with the statements of the parties involved. Or let me state that another way. What is depicted on the video is consistent with the statements of all the parties involved. Additional forensic analysis needs to be conducted of evidence, and ultimately we need to get the autopsy results. The district attorney, Mike Ramsey, will provide more information when it becomes available. Now I want to update you on our current status to develop a list of people who are currently unaccounted for. As I told you, we are refining our process and increasing our capacity to go through the information that we have, and then ultimately work to identify locations of those individuals or ultimately account for them. So as of today, we have accounted for 329 individuals who were on the list of unaccounted for persons. That number has increased by 102 as of today. As of tonight, the list that we will be releasing, the current list of unaccounted for individuals, stands at 1,011, which is an increase from yesterday of 380. I want you to understand, though, that this is a dynamic list. It will fluctuate both up and down every day. And the list is derived from essentially 3 different data sets. First, people are now calling into the call center that we established. And we have more resources in there allowing us to increase the capacity or the volume of calls that we're able to accept. Number 2, people have emailed us information about unaccounted for individuals. We're now able to process those emails and add them to the list. And third, as I talked about last night, in the initial hours of this extraordinarily chaotic event, as people were calling in, talking about people that they couldn't find or who were unaccounted for, that information was being entered as rapidly as possible by our public safety dispatchers into our records, or CAD and records management system. You can imagine the intense pressure that they were under. So that data is now being reviewed and mined, and the information about potentially unaccounted people is being pulled out and added to this list. That's a long, arduous process because as the emergency was progressing, the dispatchers were trying to get as much information as possible, but they had to do it really quickly because of the volume of calls that they were receiving. I say that because I think it's important when you report this number, you should report it with context. You shouldn't just report the number because it's misleading in terms of it. The information I'm providing you is still somewhat raw data. We find that there's the very likely possibility that the list contains duplicate names. In some cases, it's possible that the same individual is listed twice or more. Oftentimes, someone will call in and they won't know the exact spelling of an individual's name, so it gets listed based on what they perceive the spelling to be. It's going to take time for our investigators to go through and verify those names and then ultimately be able to determine if it's the same individual or if there's duplicates and go from there. The reason that I put this information out, though, without refining the data or going through that is because, as I told you in the past, I can't let perfection get in the way of progress. It's important for us to get the information out so that we can get started on identifying these unaccounted individuals. So please, when you report this information, assist me in providing the appropriate context and explaining what's going on. Okay? Since last night's briefing, I again have the very unfortunate duty to report to you that an additional 8 human remains were recovered during our search efforts today. That brings the total number of human remains located and collected at this point to 71. Of the 8 that were located today, 7 of them were found in Paradise. All were inside structures. 1 was found in Magalia, and those human remains were found inside of the structure. Of the 71 human remains that we have found, we have tentatively identified 58 of those individuals, and we're waiting on upon DNA confirmation to be able to say conclusively who they are, and then when the process of notifying their next of kin will take place. As of tonight, I have 2 additional individuals who have been positively identified, and their next of kin has been notified. They are Paula Dodge, age 70, from Paradise, and Randall Dodge, age 67, of Paradise. As I told you last night, I was going to bring some subject matter experts with me to explain a little bit more about our process of searching for, recovering, identifying, and ultimately determining the cause of death of individuals who we are able to recover. And I want to bring these individuals up and have them explain that. But I do want to give you a report on what has been transpiring with the assistance of the Sacramento County Coroner's Office. So to date, the Sacramento County Coroner's Office has received 63 decedents. The number is 71, but those 8 bodies have not yet been transferred to the custody of the Sacramento Coroner's Office. That's why there is a discrepancy in that number. Of those 63 human remains that they have located, they have been able to complete 39 exams. They have obtained DNA samples from 18 of them. And Andy Rapid DNA, a company that is assisting us in the identification of these individuals, I have a representative here tonight to talk with you more about that process. But they have obtained 14 reference samples from people who may be related to the decedents. Through the efforts of the Sacramento County Coroner's Office in collaboration with our other partners, we have identified 6 of the decedents. I told you about 4 of them a couple of nights ago, and I told you about 2 more tonight. 4 of those individuals were identified by fingerprints and 2 by dental records. At this point, there have been no DNA identifications based on DNA, but now that we're up and running, we have this process going, I would anticipate that we'll start seeing more of those identifications come through DNA. Again, I have some subject matter experts here to tell you more about our process and the resources that we have available to us. And so I'm going to tell you who they are, and then they will come up and explain. So with regard to the law enforcement mutual aid and mass casualty mutual aid that we have, I have Chief Mark Pazin. He is the Chief of Law Enforcement for the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. In addition to that, I have Commander Joe Moses of the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. He will explain to you about our search effort. I have Commander Tom Madigan. Matt, say it please. Madigan. Thank you, I apologize. Tom Madigan of the Alameda County Sheriff's Office, who will explain to you about some technology that the Alameda County Sheriff's Office has brought to bear with regard to using drones to take pictures of the area, and hopefully we'll be able to release that through an interactive map and provide people some understanding of what's going on. And then last, I have the Chief Information Officer, Stephen Meir from Andy Rapid DNA. We also have Dr. Ashley Kindle of California State University, Chico, and Alex Perron, who is the supervisor of the Human ID Lab. They will not be making a presentation, but they will be available after the questions have been answered to answer questions about some of the photographs that you have up here, as well as these other subject matter experts. So with that, I'd like to invite Chief Pazin up to give his presentation.
Thank you, Sheriff. My name is Mark Pazin. I am the Chief of Law Enforcement for California Office of the Emergency Services and our Homeland Security component at the state level. On behalf of the Director Gillarducci, he again extends his sympathies, and our hearts go out to everybody here in Butte County. I want to start off by saying that the system works. The law enforcement mutual aid system and the mass fatality system is second to none, in my estimation, here in the United States. California is broken up into 7 regions, in which Butte County is in Region 3. As soon as the fire started and Sheriff Pony understood the nature and severity of this fire, he immediately called me, as he normally does, and we started the process of delivering over 200 law enforcement personnel immediately from different areas throughout this region and into the Region 4 area, as a lot of the personnel, we started to deplete of those resources. This is supported by the State Operations Center at Mather, California, of which this cannot be done because of those personnel on that operation floor ensuring that we get the best information, that it's delivered in a timely manner, and that our law enforcement operations center, which is adjoins the operations center at the state level, is directly connected. As I mentioned, 200 law enforcement personnel that were divided into 12-hour shifts starting immediately. They were augmented, as the chief had mentioned, by the California Highway Patrol, by other state and federal law enforcement agencies to comprise ensuring that the citizens of Butte County were well protected, as evidenced yesterday and as the commander had mentioned with the Highway Patrol and identifying persons in restricted areas. This is also supplemented by the California National Guard, in which we have hard checkpoints, and that they are consistent with the mission resource tasking as part of our system. It's unfortunate that we had to invoke, in this particular fire incident, the mass fatality mutual aid system. This brought together over 600 dedicated men and women to assist in finding the decedents that Sheriff Pony has mentioned, and it was because of their hard work that we're able to find these persons, unfortunately, that they perished. Of that, I want to the dubious honor that this is another first. This is the largest deployment of search and rescue personnel that we have had to deliver to the state of California. With this Seed and Recovery brings many professionals together. You will hear from some of them, but just to mention a few, and these are from all over the state of California: Los Angeles, San Mateo, Alameda. And I want to also, again, emphasize that the system works regardless if it's law enforcement mutual aid or the mass fatality mutual aid that we practice for every year throughout with the California State Coroners Association. So with that, search and rescue, I mentioned, approximately 400. Human remain dogs, 24 canines. We have the National Guard, 112 personnel, anthropologists. And this is why it's so important that we have those professionals working with us under the mutual aid system, is because we're able to identify immediately if these are human remains or animal remains. That immediate review allows the law enforcement professionals and other coroner investigators to go on to the next scene so that we can, as quickly as possible, efficiently and professionally, go to the next spot that there could be persons that perished. The missing persons investigators that we have procured, approximately 23, and for forensic odontologists, as Sheriff had also mentioned, for the identifying those persons. The mobile command post, again, we have the proper infrastructure here, and Folsom Police Department has provided that for us. The pathologists assisting have also come from San Mateo, Alameda, and Sonoma. There are so many people to thank. I'd be remiss to start because I know I forget some someone or some agency, but I want to leave in closing that the way that the governor and the director have envisioned the mutual aid system, regardless if it's law enforcement or mass fatality, has proven its worth, in my estimation, just in the rapid response that we have from all our allied agencies, whether they be at the local level, sheriff's departments, police departments, CHP, California National Guard. It is working seamlessly. And with that, I would like to introduce the next speaker, and that would be from Monterey, and he can explain the search and rescue process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. My name is Joe Moses. I'm Commander with Monterey County Sheriff's Office. I'm the search manager assigned at for this incident. We are currently on the 5th day of our search, and through the system that the Chief has just explained, we've gathered resources, specialized resources from 38 different sheriff's offices throughout the state. Those numbers that he spelled out, those are per day. So that's not just total, that's every day. We're getting 600 plus people to assist in this search. As he said, we're making teams up of wilderness search and rescue team members, coroner investigators, human remains detection canines, anthropologists. We have a lot of fire units, the California National Guard, and the California Office of Emergency Services. So we are assembling those teams, and we've established 2 priorities. Our first priority is these missing person lists. As the investigators go through the list and determine that there's an actual address that they need to have searched, they pass that information on to us. We send a team out to that particular address and we search it. That's our highest priority. In the meantime, while we're waiting for those results to come back, or while the teams are already in the field with the extra personnel that we have, we're going through systematically, door by door, car by car, and searching all of the evacuation zones for any kind of remains that we can detect. Our intention is to clear all of those evacuation zones door to door by the time we're finished with this operation. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tom Madigan. I'm a division commander with the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. First off, I'd like to say on behalf of Sheriff Ahern, the Alameda County Sheriff's Office is proud to support our public safety partners in Butte County. Our hearts go out to the victims, all the victims of this terrible tragedy. In addition to providing search and rescue teams, law enforcement mutual aid, coroner's mutual aid, the Sheriff's Office is working to coordinate UAV or drone teams from throughout the region to work in careful coordination with CAL FIRE's manned aviation. We have teams from the Menlo Park Fire Department, Contra Costa County Sheriff's Office, Alameda County Sheriff's Office, and the Union City Police Department. Today, they conducted approximately 90 flights covering over 1,500 acres in the area of Paradise, east of Clark. The idea is to create 2D geo-referenced maps with property overlays by stitching together photographs. They took approximately 10,000 photographs today, and we're working to process the entire town to share with the search and rescue teams, to use in the field as updated base maps to assist them in their search.
Good evening. I'm Stephen Muir, Chief Information Officer at Andy Corporation out of Longmont, Colorado. We're in the business of rapid DNA identification. First, I want to express our support and sympathy to everyone impacted by this tragedy. It is an honor to be here supporting Sheriff Honey and the Butte County Sheriff's Office. When we realized the magnitude of this situation, our team of scientists and public safety experts knew we could be of assistance and offered our assistance free of charge as a humanitarian effort. On Monday evening, we reached out to Sheriff Honey, explained our capabilities and our proven technology, and on Tuesday, following that, he accepted our offer to come out, and we were on the ground with 6 people on Tuesday morning, beginning our operations. At this point, we've become fully integrated in the process of working with both the coroner's offices and in the gathering of reference DNA samples from the individuals of families missing people. The process of using DNA to identify victims is a 2-pronged process. working with the coroner to collect and catalog the DNA of victims, and collecting DNA comparison samples from immediate family members. At this point, we're working full speed with the coroner to identify remains and have been working with the sheriff and California Department of Justice to collect DNA samples of immediate family members, initially at the sheriff's office and now at the Family Assistance Center. Our need now is for parents and children of that have missing family members to go to the Family Assistance Center at the old Sears building at Chico Mall between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. to have the DNA swab collected for comparison purposes. It is best to go there and be swabbed by one of our purple capped swabs for use in this comparison. There has been some misinformation about going to other agencies around the state and gathering DNA from there, and that just leads to a delay in our ability to link the information with the folks we're gathering from the coroner's office. So I've been asked to briefly explain the process of rapid DNA and how that's assisting in this situation. So this instrument right here is an Andy DNA instrument. It uses this device that we call a chip. This is essentially a DNA laboratory right here. This device, we take samples of DNA on a swab, either a cheek sample from a relative, an immediate relative, or working with the coroner's office, bone or other tissue that is found in the field. It is taken, it's inserted into the chip is placed into the instrument, and approximately 2 hours later, we have DNA identification information relative to that sample. From there, the information leaves the machine, goes into a database and data tools that we have, and is compared with reference samples to look for familial relationships. It's fully automatic, DNA lab in a box, and the expert engine or the software rules that allow us to read this and analyze the results very quickly without involving a number of human steps that take a significant amount of time. So with this, we're able to quickly move things forward. Again, our huge need at this point is for families that have missing relatives to get swabbed. A parent or a sibling of the folks that are missing is most helpful to us. Come to the Assistance Center, we'll swab you, it's very quick, and we'll move forward with the process. Thank you very much.
Okay, so at this time we'll open it up for questions. We'll do the same format that we used yesterday. So I'll ask the pool if they have any questions specific to our Operations Section Chief from CAL FIRE. Any questions for the Operations Section Chief from CAL FIRE? Seeing none. Any questions for our meteorologist?
I don't know if this is a section chief or a meteorologist question, but with rain coming, is there any testing being done in terms of flooding or flood risk? I know a bear team normally would do that, but because of the how close this is there any study being done on that front?
So the question is specific to the rains coming, and are we worried about any flooding or?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the work team?
Good evening, my name is Mark Brown. I'm the Deputy Incident Commander for Incident Management Team 4. And you mentioned bear teams. For this incident, we are requesting and have a watershed emergency response team, which is similar to a bear team responding, taking samples so that we can analyze and understand what impacts any rain will have.
Any other questions for the meteorologist or fire operations? All right. Let's move on to any questions.
One down there.
Hiding down here.
Sorry. What's the threshold for the rate of rainfall that can trigger a mudslide or a mud flow around this burn area?
So the question is, what's the threshold for the rainfall that could trigger a mudslide?
So as far as this incident in this area, the hydrologists have to do an analysis of the land and burn severity, and they go through and see what the soils are. If the soils are hydrophobic, hydrophobic soils just means that there's a they don't soak up any water, and they shed off the water, and it creates a situation where you can get debris flows. Typically, you know, after a severe burn has gone through, you're looking at a fairly good rate of rainfall that needs to happen in order to get that. You know, one example would be around a ½ inch per hour, or a ¼ inch of rain within 30 minutes, or also let's see, a 1/10 of an inch of rain within 15 minutes. And so those are just rough thresholds. Of course, you know, as I said, hydrologists have not done their analysis yet. As they do, we'll get a much better picture as far as those rainfall rates. We are not, at this time, we're not expecting those rainfall rates with this storm. So I want to just put your minds at ease for now. This will bring some rain, but we're talking about steady rainfall rates over a 24-hour period. Thank you.
Okay. One last call for the meteorologist.
Can I ask something? The remains that they're still up there, is anybody protecting them from the environment? I mean, many of them have not been found. So is anybody has figured out how to protect it now that it's going to rain?
So that is a great question. Do you mind if we save that for the discipline that can answer that? And then we'll definitely get that question for you. So I think we're good on the meteorologist and fire. Why don't we go to any questions for Chief Newman from the CHP? Chief Newman from the CHP.
Maybe for the meteorologist, but or him or someone else, but basically, is there a concern about finding remains before it starts raining? How would that complicate?
Is that going to be the save? Save it, yeah. So we'll come back to that question. I appreciate it. So any questions for Chief Newman of the CHP? All right, why don't we go to any questions for Sheriff Honey?
You know, given the fact that the list of people who are unaccounted for is still so long and we're a week out from the event at this point, you know, should the public be bracing itself for the fact that potentially many of these people will eventually be identified as either, you know, missing and presumed dead or deceased?
So you were here when I gave that information, right? Okay, and I talked to you about the fact that the list is still very much raw data, right? And that there is the possibility for duplicate names, right? And we talked about how I want to push information out in the interest of progress versus perfection, right? So when you write your story, you're going to articulate that for me, correct?
Right, and I asked because it seems like...
Correct? You did that for me, right? Very good. So I think it's important for that context to be understood for the very reason that you're asking the question. I don't want people to make assumptions about what possible things could be without understanding the context of the data that they're basing that on. Make sense? Secondly, I don't think it's appropriate for any of us to sit and speculate about what the future holds with regard to this. We've talked about how this has been a catastrophic event. We've talked about the number of homes that have been destroyed in terms of real numbers versus speculation. And I've done that each night with regard to the remains that were recovered. I've been very upfront, right, with how difficult the situation is and how grave it is. But I don't think it's appropriate for me to speculate on the ultimate gravity of it, which is why I released the numbers with the information I have and hoping that you'll provide the appropriate context. Oh, sorry.
I just had a clarification question. You said 58 have been tentatively identified. Does that include the 6 you've identified to us, or is that separate?
Now, tentative identifications would mean that they aren't conclusively identified. The ones that are conclusively identified, we then notify their next of kin, and I provide you with their names.
Perfect.
Sheriff, is the whole ID system and the missing list, is it being complicated by the fact that many people who lived up there may have been older, they may not have relatives immediately, or they may be sort of transient, or you may have people living up there for other things? How difficult is it to get this list in order of sort of the missing? When you have a lot of transient people living up there, you have older people living up there that may not necessarily have, immediate next to kin?
Well, I'm going to do my best to answer that question. I'll start with what you said is how difficult is this list to put together? And I'll begin by answering that. It's difficult because we have a significant event, an unprecedented event where a massive number of people were displaced from their homes and they were scattered all over Northern California. And so it's easy for them to lose contact with one another because the traditional means in which they keep contact with each other, in many cases, are no longer exist or they don't have as robust access to it. So that said, I think that adds to the difficulty. That, coupled with the way in which the data is being collected or the sources of data, and I told you the very chaotic nature in which the initial data was collected. Now, I'm not going to speculate on the number of transients in that area or the demographics of the area with regard to age. I will tell you, it's interesting because there's been some misconception that the town of Paradise or Magalia is a retirement community. I've heard that stated time and time again, and I think that's an inaccurate. Go ahead and get that if you need to. I think that is a mischaracterization of the full demographics of the area and kind of does a disservice. As a matter of fact, I've had members of the community ask me to make that clarification for everybody. And so I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to do that. I'm not, one second, okay. So you've asked me how difficult. I think there are a number of factors that make this difficult. The demographics of the individuals involved certainly may play a part in it, but I think the bigger part of that, at least in talking to my investigators who are working on that, is that trying to get the various sources that we're using to collect the data, telephone calls, emails, and the prior data, is what is causing the difficulty right now, and that's the best answer to have.
You mentioned earlier that some remains may never be found just by the nature of the fire, and you also mentioned that you may have wrong spellings in the list.
Yeah.
Is it possible that we just never will know from this fire precisely how many people have perished?
Well, I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility. It is my sincere hope to account for everybody who is missing, and identify any human remains that we have. But that's the nature of a tragedy like this. Yes, sir.
Sure. Do you have any clarity on if the body that was found by the CHP yesterday by the side of the road is a part of this total of number of victims?
So I have been working to that end, and I think that's a great question also because Chief Newman and I talked about this particular situation. Remember, this is a massive undertaking, and we have hundreds and hundreds of people who are working on this. We're trying to keep all of this information straight. I can assure you that when we go out and actually collect remains or when we tow vehicles, that is being accounted for. But how that information moves through the process ultimately up to us for our press briefings, sometimes it's difficult to understand how that all came to be. And part of that is because I don't spend a lot of my day looking over the shoulder of the people who are doing this work because I'd rather than do the work and get it done. That said, it's a lot of words for me ultimately telling you that we're looking into it, and I hope to have an answer for you in a little bit. Thank you, Don. Yes, sir.
Sheriff, you're asking for context in the reporting of the missing numbers. Is that related at all? Are you hearing from members of the community concerns about just the wrong numbers? Is that why you're asking us to do this?
Oh, no, not at all. I think we're all concerned. I apologize. I always feel compelled to look at somebody. Would you move over so I can see you? Outstanding. I'm concerned about the numbers because I'm concerned about the citizens of my community. I'm concerned that many of my citizens have been displaced, that at this point many of them are unaccounted for, and I'm deeply concerned by the fact that a number of them have perished. It's not about complaints from the community. It's about me wanting you guys to do the best job that you possibly can to provide context to the information that is out there. Because you know, I'm sure from your experience, that a number without context doesn't always tell the full story. And so it's my plea to you to get that information out.
Have you begun, of the confirmed dead, have you begun to release those remains to families so they can bury them?
So I don't have that information. I believe, I don't believe we have been able to do that, but that's not, I think, unusual given the circumstances, because many of the family members perhaps are also displaced, and there are a lot of things that they need to do to ultimately get their lives in order. And so we will, of course, keep those remains safe until they're in a position to do that. In addition to that, there's the possibility that the family members are out of the area. It hasn't been, in terms of that process, we're still relatively short or time frame within that process.
Are you still receiving calls from family members who are looking for missing people? Like, is that process still active?
Yes, we've set up a call center where people are encouraged to call in, and one of the things that as I talked about, is we're still receiving calls that are being added to those lists. We're still reviewing the emails, and we're still receiving the data that we can.
Are they like trickling in, or are they still at a steady?
I don't know exactly what the rate is, but I do know from visiting the call center that the people staffing it are doing very steady work.
Sheriff,
yes, sir.
In terms of just adding context to the number from yesterday to today, is it all three of these different sources that you're talking about, people calling, email, or is it specifically one of them, your dispatchers going back and reviewing calls? Can you sort of be more specific from yesterday to today, where the additions are coming from on the list?
So all three, because I have because I have increased capacity and resources, we're able to take in that data from all three of those sources.
More one than others, though, or is it?
All three. And you know why I don't know the answer to that question? Because I don't divert staff away from the job that they're doing to have them tell me those kinds of things, because I need them to do the job that they're doing. Yes, sir.
Sheriff, of the people you've tentatively ID'd, are those people you're including in the missing persons list as well? Because we've been talking to a lot of people who are missing loved ones who aren't seeing their names.
Have they called in? Have they called? Okay, fantastic. Well, as I've talked to you, we have staff that we're trying to get all that in there. Again, folks.
But are they being excluded if you have a tentative ID on something?
I don't have the answer to that question. That is something that all we do. I think once we positively or confirm the ID is probably going to take that. But I'll talk with our staff in terms of how that process is, and we can update you later. That's a good question. Thank you. Okay.
Can you, with such a high number of missing, is that going to unaccounted for? Is that going to severely delay when people, civilians, can go back up there, because you don't want to disturb?
No, I don't necessarily believe.
Also the rain question.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I don't necessarily believe that will be a significant delay in that. We're working through that very, very quickly and trying to ultimately get to that. But remember that many of those names, again, of individuals who are unaccounted for, very well may be safe in other parts of the area. So that's why we established a process to look for, to go to residences where we have reason to believe that there are remains. Either they've been reported to us by someone who witnessed or saw something that led them to believe there were human remains, or we have information from people who knew them that said, I know they were there when I left and they refused to leave. So we know those interests. But then we have a second layer, which you heard about, which is we're then going to residents where we don't necessarily have information to believe that remains are there, but we're checking it anyway. And then we have a third layer where we're going through and we're sweeping everything. And if you have any additional information or questions about that, I do have one of our search leaders here that after we're done with the questions, I'm sure he'll be willing to take some questions. With regard to the rain question, let's come back to that. Can you repeat the question for me? The rain question?
I am sure there still remains out there in the open.
Yeah, well,
within
okay.
a house or outside a house or something.
Yeah.
Is any way that have been processed on how to protect that or recover that before the rain?
Well, certainly that's an area of concern for us, and that's why we have dedicated so many resources to this. As you heard, this is an unprecedented incident where we had brought more search and rescue resources into an area to conduct search than has ever happened before in the history of California. And I think that's the first thing that we're doing to get to and recover those remains before we get to that point. The process that we talked about is we're trying to get to those residents where we have reason to believe there are remains, or those where there's a higher likelihood of remains to be at, and then finally we're searching the areas. But the fact of the matter is, this is a massive area, and in many cases in the town, it's a highly populated area. And as much as I wish that we could get through all of this before the rains come, I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if it is, but I don't know if it isn't either. And in that regard, there's no way to go through and put a tarp or tent over the entire area that might protect it. It is it's a disheartening situation, but what I can tell you is that we're working as fast as we possibly can to get through that. Okay? There was another...
it was just related. But are you racing ahead of the rain? Will that really complicate the search for remains at those sites?
I think this is already a very complicated situation. Anytime you change the dynamics or factor, it could add a level of difficulty. But what is true is I can't stop the rain from coming. And the rain coming actually may have a benefit because it might help the firefighting effort, right? Yeah. And so we're going to work as hard and as fast as we can to get that done, and we're going to do the best job we can. And I think that you can see by virtue of the fact that the people that I've brought here to support our mission, we're serious, we're committed, and we're going to do our absolute best to get this job done as quickly but as thoroughly as possible. Any other questions?
I'm not sure if this is for you or for Andy. What happens to all the DNA in the database after this event is concluded?
I think I know the answer to that question, but I'm going to let Andy answer it. Andy, come on up.
I'm sorry, well, not Andy, but yeah, right. My representative, Andy, yes. Hi, so the question was the ultimate disposition of the data after we're done. All of the data that we gather will be handed to the sheriff's office for their custodial use and disposition, however they see fit. We'll leave with none of it.
Does that limit, though, that some people may not want to give DNA if they know it's just going to end up in the sheriff's database?
So when I said the sheriff let up, I don't think it's going to go into the sheriff database. It's specifically that the information will be sequestered and not used for other things. The DNA was gathered specifically for the identification of unknown deceased individuals, and that's its use. Yes, for this incident.
Any other questions? All right, thank you all.
Okay, any questions for Cal OES Chief Paisley?
The Cherokee area. If you can say something about the Cherokee area that is not being covered.
I think that's another question. Let's save that for a minute. So this is specific to Cal OES Chief Paisley. Any questions for Chief Paisley? All right, any questions for Joe Moses from the Monterey County Sheriff's Office regarding the search? All right, any questions for Tom Madigan with the Alameda Sheriff's Department?
Just quickly, I didn't understand, are you using UV light to help mount some of the stuff on the drones?
No, UAV technology.
Okay, I'm sorry,
UAV technology.
Thank you.
So the question was, are we using UV lights? And no, the answer is UAV technology.
Could you elaborate on what that is?
So we're going to elaborate on what UAV technology is.
So we're simply using 4K cameras to shoot images where there's, we send the UAVs out on an autonomous flight. They take numerous photographs. There's a certain amount of overlap, and then we bring them back and we stitch them together using a computer software, and that produces the map. We have not been using thermal imaging technology here. We're using optical cameras.
From drones.
From drones.
Is there a reason why you're not using thermal imaging?
Well, our job we've been tasked with making maps to assist the search and rescue teams. That's what our responsibility is.
Are there other drones in deploy that are using thermal technology, and is it a different agency that you know?
Not from us.
Okay.
We are operating within CAL FIRE's TFR with a TFR waiver from the FAA.
Okay, so any more questions for Tom Madigan? All right, I'm going to move on to any more questions for Stephen Meir with Andy. Any more questions for Andy, the DNA company? All right. Any more general questions for the panel?
Sorry. I had one for search and rescue, sorry. Are there any particular unique challenges to the search and rescue effort for this due to the size of the area being searched, due to the number of sites that have to be searched? Does that make it unique in any kind of way for the people that have to do it?
So to summarize, are there any unique challenges with the search and rescue efforts?
Can you elaborate on that?
Elaborate on any unique challenges to the search and rescue effort. Yes, there's a lot of challenges with this. Just the vast number of structures that we have to search. There's, as the sheriff said, there's 10,000 destroyed structures that we're going to eventually have to go through. So one of the challenges we have is how do we prioritize that? We're worried about repopulation. We want to get people back into these areas as fast as we can. We have these leads that we need to follow up on. So one of the things is how do we prioritize? And that's why we've established these two priorities right now, with the third being searching general grounds. So just the unique nature of a fire that has burned through and burned things to the ground, and how do you look for remains? It's not something that, there's not very many people in the state that are familiar with that. So it's kind of a learning process as we go for our search teams. We've had some experiences throughout the state in recent years, the Sonoma fire in Napa County. So we have some experience now, and we're just bringing that in and trying to teach new members how to search in this kind of environment.
How do you search in this kind of environment as opposed to other kinds of environments?
Usually we're searching for a missing person or a lost person in the wilderness. That's what we're doing. So we go out and we search general areas. Here we have very specific areas that we need to search, and it needs to be very systematic. So when you're searching for a person that might be lost, you're hoping that they're going to call back out to you and those kinds of things. Here we're looking for very small parts and pieces. And so we have to be very diligent and systematic in how we do our searches.
I have a question related to that.
Yes.
How big of an area is left to continue searching?
Huge. So we do have some maps up here on the board. This is our search map that we're using to document what we have searched. The green areas down below, the lighter green, is what we searched up to yesterday. I didn't have the data to put on the map from today's search, but those green areas within our zones that are outlined in the dark green, those ones have been searched today, and we've moved further up. But as you can see, with the fire burn that's outlined out there, how much area there really is. And we've really concentrated on trying to search the southern end of this so that we can repopulate. Those were the places that had the least amount of population. And we could clear those fairly quickly so we can get people repopulated. But as we move into the town of Paradise and the outlying areas that are more populated, it's going to take a lot more time.
So
Okay.
So search and rescue hasn't even gotten into the town of Paradise yet?
So this map here talks about the zones that we've searched. That second priority that I was talking about, where we do the door-to-door. We have gone into the city of Paradise. We've gone out to the community of Cal. When we get those leads. So when we're following up on those priority 1 leads, yes, we're sending teams into those other areas. So we've been all over the map, but as the systematic door-to-door search to be able to repopulate, that's what this map is reflecting.
And would you do this on a normal file? Like, if there's no structures around, why do you need to still search an area?
Well, In this particular fire, where we had people that were in vehicles, they may have been trying to flee from their homes, we still need to go out and try to search those areas that possible egress and make sure that we've covered them. And we're not going to be able to do a grid search shoulder to shoulder of the entire area, but we're trying to cover it as best we can and trying to use some logical deduction on where we need to go and search.
Okay, so this concludes our press conference for tonight. I want to do a couple things right now. If anybody would like one more time for Stephen Meir to go over the Andy system, he will do that over here on the side. If you're trying to get some footage or want to get some clean footage of that. If you want to go direct with anybody else, including any of the services, Dr. Ashley Kendall or Alex Perone from Chico State, they'll be on the side over here. And that concludes our press conference for tonight. Thank you very much.